Today, I am going to be talking about healthy relationships, both with ourselves and with other people. No matter what is going on, we can make life meaningful for ourselves and for other people. Because of interdependence, we influence people way beyond our narrow circle of friends or family. We are really not that much different from other people, and that we can accept them as they are and work skillfully with other people and work skillfully with ourselves. When we bring our concerns for ourselves into harmony with concerns for other people, our life comes into balance. We don't have this conflict between what I want and what you want. And when this becomes imbalanced, when we are very much focused on what we want from another person, then the relationship becomes unhealthy. So we have to spend time contemplating and examining how we orient ourselves towards other people so that we can build healthy, enjoyable relationships with other people. Now, relationships are based on habit, and it's important to remember that we can develop new habits, that habits are not set in stone. They might seem like it. We can develop new habits. And negative habits can be changed and replaced with positive ones. Our strongest habits go back to previous lives and also our early life when we were young, and also a culture that can be a cause for very strong habits. What comes to mind about changing habits is a short poem. It's called Autobiography in 5 Short Chapters. Chapter 1, I walk down the street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in. I'm lost. I'm helpless. It isn't my fault. It takes forever to find a way out. Chapter 2, I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I pretend I don't see it. I fall in again. I can't believe I'm in the same place, but it isn't my fault. It still takes a long time to get out. Chapter 3, I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it is there. I still fall in. It's a habit. My eyes are open. I know where I am. It's my fault. I get out immediately. Chapter 4, I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I walk around it. Chapter 5, I walk down another street. The author of this is Portia Nelson. So the point is that we can develop new habits, but we have to realize that we are the author of these habits, take responsibility, and then do something about it. So we need to make an effort to repeatedly engage in positive behavior. Having New Year's resolution type of motivation doesn't work for very long. So there are 2 senses of I that we can have. The first is instinctual or innate, and it's very subtle, and we're usually not aware of it. An example is that you're on the edge of a cliff, you're about to fall off, and you have a strong urge, impulse to step back. So that's one sense of I, which is innate. Self-preservation, you might say, when you're in a really dangerous situation. To take your hand off of something that was on the stove, a hot pan, and you grab it, and it's hot, and you let go. You don't even have to think about it. It just happens. The other is this idea of sense of self as being independent, permanent, solid, and so on and so forth. A way to analyze this that I find quite helpful is the idea of a fabricated self. Fabricated has a number of meanings, and the two that I think are most appropriate for this use of fabrication is to put together from parts, like to fabricate a refrigerator in a manufacturing plant. You get parts that are made perhaps all over the world nowadays, including chips, and then you put them together and you have a refrigerator. The other use of fabricate that I like is to fabricate evidence for a trial, which I guess you could say is lying. And so this idea of a fabricated self has both of those connotations, is that it's put together from parts, that what our parents tell us, what our teachers tell us, on the cultural messages that we get about ourselves when we're young, as well as when we're our age, messages about our race, about our gender, about our duties, our roles, and what kind of expectations we need for ourselves. If you think about it, even your name, you don't choose, it's given to you by your parents. And so we absorb all of this and develop this idea of this is who I am. But it's really just put together from parts. And the idea of fabricating evidence is that it's false. This really is not who we are. We are much more than that. With a fabricated self, we put ourselves in a box and limit ourselves in just so many ways, and do not realize what our true potential is, and that we have this interdependent relationship with the whole world. So we take this sense of self with us wherever we go throughout our life and throughout all our relationships. We buy into it, we identify with it, it seems solid. This is who I am. The ironic thing is that if you really look at it, scientists, psychologists, social scientists, and so forth, they talk about early childhood development, adolescent development, then there is adult, then there is middle-aged, and then we have geriatrics, and then we have hospice. Then you can divide it up into even more ways. That as we change, as we age, as our body changes, who we think we are changes too. It's not solid at all if you really look at it. We are not the person that we were 30 years ago in many, many different ways. As you age, you develop a different perspective on life, even if you don't understand that all of this is a fabrication. So we take things personally, and it goes through this filter of who we think we are, and we interpret it through this sense of I. And of course, other people are doing the same thing, and they project on us their expectations, who they think we are, just like we project our expectations and our idea of who they are. We project this fabricated self on others too. And so when you have difficulties with other people, the first thing is you have to realize is that you are probably projecting expectations on them, and they are probably projecting ideas and expectations on you. And this is where a lot of the problem lies. If they are angry with you, it may be that you did something, but they're totally interpreting it incorrectly from what you meant. Or it may be you did something, but you interpreted incorrectly where they were coming from, what their intentions were, and so forth. Now, our emotions depend on what we experience. And our experience is how we interpret it. I don't like jalapeno peppers. Some people really like them. The pepper is no different for the person that likes it and the person like me that you would just as soon leave them in the grocery store. It is the way the person that puts them in their mouth interprets what happens when it goes into your mouth. So our perceptions are rooted in our own sense of I. Another way of explaining this is the story about a man that I know that lives out here in the country. He moved out from the city to be out in a more nature-based environment. And he had a shop in a small little town in this area, population of probably about 500-600 people. And well, he had a car or has a car and has a motorcycle. He also has a bicycle, and sometimes he would ride his bicycle to work and home in the summertime in nice weather. And so he told me this story one time that he was riding his bicycle home on these country roads. You're going through fields and forests, or woods is a better term for it. And in front of him on the road, he saw a bag and immediately got angry at people throwing bags of trash out the window of their car as they're driving through this beautiful countryside. And as he rode up to it and got a closer look, he saw that it wasn't a bag of trash, it was a bag of groceries. So instantly his anger was gone, and now he was happy because it was his bag of groceries. So he stopped, picked up the bag, got back on his bicycle, and quickly realized that it was too big, bulky, heavy for him to ride the bicycle and hold on to the bag at the same time. So now his happiness was gone because he was going to have to leave it. And somebody else might find his bag of groceries and take it, just like he intended. So he decided to hide it in the bushes so no one would find it. And so now he's worried. The happiness is gone. Now he's worried. And so he gets on the bike and rides home quickly, gets in the car, drives back, stops, gets out, looks for it, finds it. Now he's happy again. He's no longer worried. He's not angry. Gets in the car and goes home. Well, the bag did nothing. It just lay there. Every emotion that he went through, he was projecting on the bag. The bag was not causing him anger. It was his own habitual patterns. The same thing with happiness. If we realize that our experience depends on how we are interpreting it, really, it's like watching a movie. That when you get to a sad part in the movie, maybe you start tearing up, and you get to a happy part, and then you start feeling happy, like you're in the movie, even though you're watching it. So it's important to realize that the emotions that we are having are a lot of times, if not always, based on our thoughts and our interpretations of what's going on around us, what's going on inside of us, and so forth. So this me and mine restricts our view of ourselves. We're really much more than that. It prevents us from seeing the countless wholesome connections we have to other people. We see the world as separate from us rather than these interconnections. I went shopping yesterday. Literally everybody in that store was working to get me what I wanted. You know, I was looking for it. It was a big store. It was a Home Depot. Well, where is such and such located? And well, they told me, you know, and I found it. And they were out. But I found where it would have been. And so I talked to another man about, you know, do you have any more left? And, you know, well, they didn't have it. But it's important to remember, even if the people at the store maybe not so friendly, they're still there and can help you in some way or another. And if no other way, they can help you be a little more patient. There is this hook of attachment that goes with relationships, attachment and aversion. And this reminds me of an experience that I had the other day. This isn't so much about relationships with other people, but relationships with my own stuff, property. I had a number of different insurance policies that came due, and I was paying them. And initially I was thinking, boy, this is a lot of money to be paying for insurance, auto insurance, insurance on my pickup truck, property insurance, and so on down the line. And quickly I realized, the reason why I'm paying all this insurance is because I'm attached to property. I've got a pickup truck, a car, and then a lot of buildings and personal property. And of course, maybe if I wasn't attached to it, I wouldn't have insurance. It wouldn't matter if it lost, it went by, bye-bye. Anyway, it's important to look inward rather than be looking outward. What's going on here? So much of our relationships with other people is influenced by trying to get out of what we want or get what we want from others, and then pushing away what we don't want. In Buddhism, they talk about non-attachment. And there's a big difference between non-attachment and detachment. Detachment is kind of a feeling of indifference. Again, as I drove away from the store, I came to a stoplight, and there was a man out there with a sign begging for money. And it was difficult for me to give him money, so I said some mantra for him. You don't have to just I don't want to even acknowledge this person's existence. That's detachment. So we can say mantra and prayers for people that we are unable to, or for some reason don't want to help financially or in other ways. So non-attachment is an absence of attachment. It leaves plenty of room for healthy feelings to blossom. Very simply, if you want, whether it be flowers or vegetables, you don't want them too close together, usually, or in the case of flowers where they can grow in a huge clump, you don't want to have something over them that is blocking the sunlight from them. Again, with the exception of those flowers that will grow in the shade of a dense forest. So we want to nurture the healthy feelings. We need to give them space to grow and blossom. But because of attachment, if there is attachment, we become totally consumed by something or someone. There's no room to think of anything else. There's no space to move around with. There's not many possibilities. And with aversion, it's the same thing. You get totally concerned with the situation and nothing else matters. You just want to get out of the room. You want to get away from that person. And if you can't, you get angry. So we need to rise above the situation and see it from a broader point of view, to see the bigger picture. Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche would talk about an aerial view, like, let's say, the view of a drone. The drone camera is above, and it sees a much bigger picture. I guess you could say the difference between seeing the tree and seeing the forest. So if we're able to come out from the middle of a situation and see it from a different angle, a different viewpoint, things change dramatically. You can still be in these relationships that we have, but you have a more open view. You become more accepting. You see more possibilities, and kind of I and me falls apart or weakens. Now, the reason why we don't see attachment as a problem is that we look for faults outside of ourselves. We blame the objects of our attachment for the problem. There is a saying of woodworkers, and that is, an amateur blames his tools, a craftsman works with his mistakes. Both make mistakes. But if you can look at yourself as being part of this problem, you can work with yourself. You can work with your mind. You can change your mind. You can change your viewpoint. When we relate to people as objects of attachment, as a basis of self-gratification and serving our own purposes, this is when problems arise. And you think the problem is the other person. They need to change, not me. Yet you may be the one that is causing all the trouble, or you may have a significant part in causing all the trouble. If you truly love someone, then you will look at them as extremely precious to you, as valuable as you are to yourself. You'll cherish them as much or even more than yourself. But if there's attachment with that love, then you see them more in terms of there to make you happy and fulfill your needs. So this is a good way to, you might say, look within and determine what kind of love this is. So when we let go of being the center of the relationship becomes very different. We stop engaging with people on the basis of what they can do for us. We don't have this constant desire to pull some people towards us and keep others away. We start seeing many different ways of connecting positively to people. I find that a very simple way of connecting to people when I am out in public is just plain to smile, to kind of acknowledge to that other person that you are recognizing their presence and that you're happy. And it's amazing, you get smiles back. So from this wide open perspective of not being the center, lots and lots of possibilities develop that you wouldn't have been aware of before, and the love deepens. On the other hand, a lot of people fall in love with superficial things. They fall in love because they like the way the person looks. They like the things that the person does. They like the feeling that they get when they're around that person and so forth. This doesn't work very well in relationships because things change. We can make love a conscious spiritual practice, that love is like a living thing, like a plant or a tree, that it needs to grow continuously. A tree goes through cycles. In the spring, it buds, and then the leaves come out. Then if you look closely, you'll see that the trees have flowers and then have various types of seeds that are produced in the summertime. Then in the fall, the leaves fall off. Then in the wintertime, at least up where I live, the trees look like they could be dead. And then spring comes again. To realize that there are cycles that we have in our lives and in our relationships, and that in relationships, you have to keep effort into nurturing the relationship. To switch metaphors, if you put a relationship on cruise control, it will stagnate and eventually die. We have relationships of all kinds with people. Some of them are, you might say, we have little control over them. Like you're born, you have parents. That relationship is always there, whether it goes south or not, that sometimes these relationships are quite healthy and sometimes they are quite unhealthy. But that basic relationship is always there. We can, as I have been talking about, work with these relationships so that they can become healthier by, first of all, examining ourselves and letting go of our expectations, and then understand the other person or other people at a deeper level. You have to listen before you can hear. You have to look before you can see. So it takes effort. I have talked in the past about my parents, especially my mother, who was in a lot of emotional pain. Her whole life, she had a very difficult, traumatic childhood, and she brought this with her into her adult life. And I had a very difficult relationship with her. In the end, after a lot of practice, contemplating, self-examination, and so forth, I finally just let go of expecting her to change little by little by little. The relationship changed. She also developed dementia. A lot of her negative habits also gradually dissolved. But even before that, the relationship changed. One of my favorite stories is she kind of looked at me as her child, which is very common, her baby boy. And so she liked to put food from her plate onto my plate, kind of like I was a 2-year-old and she's feeding me. And then I became a vegetarian and she was totally against being a vegetarian. And if we were out, I remember one time at a wedding, we sat together, it was a family wedding, and she started putting meat on my plate. And I got mad at her and said things that I later regretted. And I realized that that was not an appropriate response. And what I started doing then is I would look for a small plate, like a saucer under a teacup, and I would put it next to my plate and said, "Mom, now put the meat on that plate." And she would do that, and then I wouldn't eat it. She was happy. I was happy. No problem. It is looking for new ways to relate to other people in these relationships, even difficult relationships. Pema Chodron said, do something different, anything different. Just by doing something different, you're breaking this negative habit. And so our expectations make relationships and love conditional. I have a list. It's called the 5 unreasonable expectations in life. Number 1, I'm the most important person in the room, and it's a pretty big room, and I take this room with me wherever I go. Number 2, I should be respected just because of who I am. Other people have to earn my respect. I'm not going to respect them until they prove that they are worthy of my respect. Number 3, other people should live up to my expectations. Not only that, but if I'm in a relationship, my partner should know what my expectations are without me even having to tell them, because they love me. Number 4, I should not be harmed in any way. I should not have to wait an exceptionally long time at a stoplight or in rush hour traffic when there's road construction going on. This is totally unreasonable, and this is harming me. And the 5th one is life should be fair, and I decide what's fair. I'm the Supreme Court. So we bring all these expectations that are extremely unrealistic into our relationships and into our life. And no wonder why we're having problems. Here is, I think, a very important point, that people see love towards another person as something like enjoyment or pleasure, and that their job is totally necessary, that work is more important than love. Relationships are disposable. The job is absolutely essential. And actually, it's the other way around. If you want to be happy, content, satisfied, and so forth, you need to have love in your life. Love for yourself, love for other people. This love and emotional well-being are within. We don't get it from outside of us. And so we need to look deeply within our own mind to develop real love and healthy relationships. It's good to know our faults as well as our good qualities. Then these lie within. It's good to realize we are not the sum total of our faults or the sum total of our good qualities. We really transcend both of these. The capacity for love rests within our heart. This is metaphorical heart, of course. And so do the obstacles to love, our self-centered habits, our attachment, our aversion, our expectations. Now, some of our expectations are that we assume relationships will last forever, so to speak. But death is always a possibility, and separation is always a possibility. A relationship can end, it's, you might say, active phase, but our love doesn't have to for that person. We have to be prepared to accept that it's over with, whether it be by death or by people moving on and no longer being friends, or a close, intimate relationship being over through divorce. But the relationship does not have to end. First of all, realize that death is inevitable, and that when a person dies, that our love does not have to end for them. To focus our grief on the person that you loved rather than on what you lost. We can kind of think this way, that this person who I loved that has died, they wished for my happiness and they tried to bring it about. Even the last few days that this person was alive, if they were conscious and cognitively coherent, that they may have wanted me to be happy. And they did not want me to suffer. And therefore, I can keep this in mind and try to fulfill that person's aspiration for me, which is by being happy. Something that I realized when my best friend died way back in 1985, and I went through a very deep grieving process. And eventually I realized that you can grieve for what the person that died lost, their life. That person that died had a wife and a 9-year-old daughter. So they lost a husband and a father and a wage earner, a breadwinner. I met his parents and his brother's sister. They were close to him his whole life. They lost that. I lost a friend. I was grieving because of what I lost, not because of what everybody else lost. And then, of course, there were lots of other people that lost a friend too. Eventually, I came to realize that I was being very self-centered and to focus more on what other people lost. And the kind of, again, it's a different way of looking at the situation. It opens up the space. Actually, this caused me to realize impermanence, my own impermanence, and it led me to Buddhism. So out of this whole process of death and grieving, I was able to experience a lot of spiritual growth. I still dedicate merit to him and his family and so forth, but it really helped open up my eyes to this whole process of relationships and death. When relationships end and people part ways, realize that impermanence is always present and this is a natural occurrence. Contemplate that change is not always necessarily bad, that good can result. as the story I told about myself, that there is post-traumatic growth, the doors open, change is part of the rhythm of life, and this can bring freshness into our lives. We need to let go of the expectation that another person has to reciprocate your love or even know that you still love them. You can just love, contemplate impermanence, and focus on the welfare of others. And these help maintain our equilibrium.